Marcus Trent leaned his shoulder against my porch rail like he owned the place, holding a bright yellow HOA violation notice between two fingers. "Last warning, Mercer. That swing's coming down, or you're paying daily fines until you learn how this neighborhood works." I stared at him, feeling the rough grain of the oak under my palm. This swing wasn't just wood and chains. It was my father's hands, every sanded edge and precise joinery carved years before he passed. And Marcus was standing here threatening to rip it out of my life like it was a loose nail. I didn't move. "You ever read your own bylaws, Marcus?" My voice stayed calm, even as heat prickled under my collar. "Because that swing predates the HOA. And the easement on this porch, my name's on it, permanently." His smirk faltered for a second. That was the stop-scroll moment. He hadn't expected me to know my ground this well. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. I straightened, letting him see that I wasn't the average homeowner he could steamroll. "I'm not just some guy on a porch," I said evenly. "I spent a decade securing embassies in hostile zones. I know what intimidation looks like, and what it costs the people dumb enough to try it." Marcus's eyes flicked to the security camera perched under my eave, the one my father helped me wire before he passed. He didn't like that. He muttered something about non-compliance and started to leave, but I didn't step aside. The creak of the swing chains behind me was the only sound, and for a second I thought about how many times my dad and I had sat there talking about life, about the family I'd build one day. Now that family was almost here. Lydia, 7 months pregnant, was inside folding tiny onesies. This swing was supposed to be where I rocked my child to sleep, where my dad's memory lived on with every soft sway. And Marcus Trent, with his clipboard power trip, thought he could take that away like it meant nothing. The oak felt warm under my hand, sun-soaked and solid. I remembered the funeral, the empty house, the way building this porch with Dad was the last time I'd seen him truly happy. That memory had weight, and I wasn't about to let Marcus erase it for the sake of some inflated HOA ego. I forced myself to smile, not a friendly one, the kind that says, "I already know how this ends for you." "Where are you watching from?" I said quietly, knowing the neighbors behind their curtains would hear every word. "Because this isn't a story about a swing. It's about a man who picked the wrong family to mess with." Marcus hesitated, one foot on the step, one still on my porch, as if he was testing how far his authority really stretched. He muttered about calling in security next time and strutted down my walkway, but I caught the tremor in his shoulders. He wanted to believe he was in control. Inside, Lydia peeked through the screen door. "He's not stopping, is he?" Her voice wavered, but she was trying to be strong. I shook my head, letting the last light of the sunset paint the swing in gold. Number. But he just made his first mistake. The quiet hum of cicadas rose in the air, and I leaned against the rail, watching Marcus drive off in his spotless black SUV. He thought a notice and a threat would scare me. He didn't know the man he was dealing with, the one who'd spent years documenting threats, countering intimidation, and protecting people under far worse pressure than a neighborhood despot with a clipboard. He had no idea that every step he took from here on out was going to dig his own grave, because I wasn't just defending wood and chains. I was defending the only piece of my father I had left, and the home where my child would take his first breath. And if Marcus Trent wanted to keep pushing, he was going to learn what it felt like when a quiet man decided he had had enough. Drop a like if you've ever wanted to stand up to unreasonable rules like this, and subscribe to see how this strategy plays out. Because this HOA just picked a fight it won't win. The first time I saw the security patrol, I thought it was a joke. A black SUV rolled slow through Willow Bend Estates, hazard lights blinking, two guys in tactical vests leaning out the windows like they were auditioning for a low-budget cop show. My porch swing creaked behind me as I watched them pass, Lydia's hand gripping my shoulder from inside the screen door. "They're seriously doing this?" she whispered, voice tight with disbelief. I kept my eyes on the SUV, the fake stenciled neighborhood security on the door catching the glow of a street lamp. It wasn't just a show of force. It was Marcus's way of telling everyone he ran this place, rules or not. I felt the cold wind scrape against my arms, carrying the faint smell of cut grass and fear from the neighbors' shuttered houses. One by one, porch lights flicked off around the cul-de-sac. People didn't want to be seen watching. That silence, the way an entire street held its breath, told me Marcus's intimidation plan was working on everyone but me. I took a slow breath. Yeah, I said to Lydia. They're really doing it, and they're hoping someone will break before I do. The SUV paused at my driveway. One of the guys, mid-40s, thick neck, mirrored sunglasses even though it was dusk, leaned out. Evening, routine, HOA security check. His voice was too casual, like he was trying to sound official without the badge to back it up. I leaned on the oak porch rail, letting the light from my camera blink red just enough to be visible. Evening. You boys get certified for that uniform cosplay, or just pull it out of a Halloween bin? The driver's jaw tightened. They idled there for a beat too long before rolling on, but not before I noticed the tablet mounted to the dash, camera feed aimed at my house. A chill slid down my spine. Marcus wasn't just playing games. He was escalating into surveillance. Inside, Lydia whispered, "Evan, this isn't safe." I turned to her, softening my voice. "I know, but he wants us scared. That's his weapon. I've seen this before in 100 different places, and it only works if we hide." Her fingers traced the door frame. Her belly was round now, the baby restless under her skin. And for a moment, I saw the porch through her eyes, a fragile, exposed place under hostile eyes. This wasn't just about a swing or a violation letter. This was about safety, about a man making his own rules in a community full of families who wanted peace. The SUV disappeared around the corner, and a different kind of silence settled in, heavy, unnatural. I caught a flicker of movement at the far mailbox cluster. Howard Delaney, the treasurer, standing stiff with his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. He saw me watching, gave the smallest nod, and turned away. Even from a distance, his posture screamed discomfort. I'd learned to read people under stress. Howard wasn't built for confrontation. He was the kind of man who signed papers to keep the peace, told himself he didn't have a choice. But that flicker in his eyes, he knew something, and it was eating at him. The night pressed on, broken only by the distant hum of that fake patrol looping the streets again. I went inside, double-checked my cameras, and pulled up the live feed on my monitor. My father used to call this preparing for the storm. In his world, storms were always coming. The trick was to be ready before the first drop fell. As I watched the SUV crawl past another neighbor's house, headlights painting nervous curtains in yellow light, I realized Marcus wasn't just poking at me. He was reminding everyone else what happened if they stood with me. Fear was his tool, and if he thought I'd fold because of a couple of guys in vests and a clipboard full of threats, he'd miscalculated. The next morning, I was out by the mailbox cluster, coffee in hand, when I saw Howard Delaney shuffle up the sidewalk. He moved like a man carrying invisible weight, shoulders hunched, eyes darting between the pavement and the houses around us. The air was cool, damp with last night's sprinklers, and somewhere a dog barked before going silent again. He nodded stiffly. "Morning, Evan." His voice cracked, just enough to betray something was gnawing at him. "Morning, Howard." I leaned against the metal post, casual but alert. "Early for you." He hesitated, fishing for his keys, letting the silence stretch. His hands trembled, just a little, when he fumbled the lock on his mailbox. For a man who'd spent years balancing ledgers and attending HOA meetings, Howard wasn't built for scenes like the one he'd witnessed last night. I could read the tension in every twitch of his shoulders. "You, saw the patrols?" His tone tried for casual, but his eyes stayed locked on the mail he didn't really need to sort. "Oh, I saw them," I said. "And so did the cameras. Marcus is escalating." Howard flinched at the name, glancing over his shoulder like saying it out loud might summon the man himself. Then he exhaled through his nose, the kind of sound you make when you want to unload a secret, but can't quite bring yourself to betray someone yet. He shuffled a few envelopes in his hand, then lowered his voice. "They shouldn't be out there like that." His lips pressed tight. It's not what we agreed to." I caught that. That meant the board. That meant he was part of this, even if only by silence. His fingers squeezed the letters so hard they curled. "Howard," I said gently, "you know this is going to get someone hurt." His jaw tightened, and for a second I thought he might walk away. But he stayed, stuck in that limbo of conscience and fear. I could see the war in his posture, loyalty to the board versus the knot in his stomach, telling him Marcus had gone too far. A light breeze rattled the row of metal boxes. The neighborhood felt too quiet, like everyone was behind their blinds pretending they weren't watching. I leaned a little closer, keeping my tone calm. I've been in places where people like Marcus think uniforms make them untouchable. It never ends well. For anyone, Howard's eyes flicked to mine, then back to his mail. You should just be careful, he muttered. His voice trembled on the word careful. He shoved the envelopes into his jacket pocket without looking at them. That's your advice? I asked softly. Be careful? He hesitated, then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod before walking away. His steps were uneven, faster than normal, like he wanted to escape the weight of standing near me, but the hunch in his back told me he hadn't escaped anything. He was carrying the board's guilt, and it was getting heavier. I stood there a moment longer, feeling the cool metal of the mailbox under my fingertips. Howard didn't have to say much. His body language had said it all. He was cracking, and cracks meant leverage. Back at the house, Lydia was on the porch swing, hands resting on her belly. Was that Howard? She asked. Yeah, I said, sitting beside her. The swing creaked under our combined weight, that familiar sound pulling me back to evenings with my father, listening to the world settle. He's not happy with what Marcus is doing. She exhaled slowly. Do you think he'll help us? Not yet, I said. But he will. People like Howard don't stay silent forever when they know something's wrong. It eats at them until they break. I glanced down the street where the patrol SUV rolled by again, slow and predatory. I didn't wave. They didn't either. The chains of the swing groaned softly in the morning breeze, and I felt the familiar rise of calm resolve. Marcus thought fear would keep this neighborhood under his thumb, but he didn't see what I saw, a man on the edge of turning and a board that was about to crumble from the inside. Drop a like if you've ever watched someone finally reach their breaking point with a bully, I murmured for the viewers. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens when that break turns into action, because it's coming. By the end of that week, Marcus decided letters and patrols weren't enough. He wanted to make it personal. It was late afternoon when I got the call from Lydia. Her voice shook, thin with fear, the kind that makes your gut twist before the words even land. Evan, they're here. 2 of them. They're in the driveway. I was still at my office across town, scrolling through a client's security report, when her voice snapped my focus to razor-sharp clarity. My heart pounded as I grabbed my keys. Stay inside, lock the door, I'm on my way. The 15-minute drive felt like an hour. Every red light burned through me. Every slow car in front of me felt like a blockade. By the time I turned onto our street, the sun was sinking low, painting the houses gold. And there they were, Marcus's so-called security volunteers, standing in my driveway like they owned it. One had a clipboard, the other leaned against Lydia's car with his arms folded. Both wore the same black tactical vests, unmarked except for a Velcro patch that said security in bold white letters. It wasn't law enforcement, it was theater, but theater can turn violent fast. I parked hard at the curb and stepped out, my boots crunching the gravel. Step away from my house, I said, my voice low and steady. Clipboard guy smirked. Sir, we're here to inform you of accumulating fines for non-compliance. HOA security has the right to inspect. You're not security, I cut in. You're trespassing. Get off my property. Behind me, the porch swing creaked as Lydia pushed the screen door open a crack. Her face was pale, one hand on the frame, the other on her belly. Evan, she said softly. I lifted a hand toward her without looking back. It's okay. Go inside. The taller volunteer stepped closer. You should watch your tone. We're authorized to enforce the board's decisions. I took one step forward, closing the distance until the evening light caught the small body camera clipped to my shirt. And I'm authorized to defend my home. You touch my wife, you set 1 foot past that porch step, and we're going to see how fast the sheriff gets here to arrest you for trespassing and impersonation. For a moment, nobody moved. The neighborhood was silent except for the distant buzz of a lawnmower 2 streets over. Then clipboard guy muttered something under his breath, and the 2 of them backed off, toward the SUV parked crooked in front of my mailbox. They didn't leave right away. They sat there idling for another minute, trying to stare me down through their tinted windows. But I didn't flinch. I stood with one hand resting lightly on the porch rail, every camera on the property aimed at them. When they finally drove off, Lydia came out, shaking. They said they could enter if I didn't comply. Her voice cracked. I pulled her into my arms, feeling the tension in her shoulders, the life moving inside her belly pressed against me. They can't. They're bluffing. And they just made their second mistake. That night, I pulled the footage from every angle, driveway, porch, and the street cam I'd mounted to catch license plates. Watching them stand inches from my wife's car, leaning into her space, sent a wave of heat through my chest. This wasn't a game anymore. Marcus had crossed the line, and the law was going to notice. I saved the files to a secure drive, labeling the folder Harassment, HOA Security 2. My old training kicked in: document, preserve, prepare. In my world, every threat was a puzzle you built piece by piece until the whole picture damned the one who thought they were untouchable. When I finally sat on the porch swing that night, the chains groaned softly and I stared down the quiet street. A single moth circled the porch light, tapping the glass in erratic bursts. The neighborhood looked calm, but it wasn't. It was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. And I already knew mine. I didn't sleep that night. The image of those two men leaning over Lydia's car burned in my mind, looping with every creak of the porch swing outside. My gut told me the next move wasn't waiting for Marcus to send his goons again. It was time to find out exactly what I was up against. By midnight, I was in my home office, the soft blue glow of my monitors painting the walls. The air smelled faintly of machine oil from my old camera mounts. I pulled up the multi-angle security footage from the driveway, pausing on the moment the taller volunteer leaned in toward my front steps. Zooming in, I studied the details: black vest, cargo pants, boots scuffed from regular use, and there, on his chest, an embroidered patch with a silver star. My stomach tightened. That wasn't just cosplay anymore. That patch was designed to mimic a sheriff's badge, and under state law, even implying law enforcement authority without being sworn in was a felony. I took a slow breath and cross-referenced my footage with public images of our county sheriff's department uniforms. Side by side, the resemblance was deliberate. Same star shape, same black vest, same reflective lettering. They were playing dress-up with real consequences. I clipped the footage into a compilation, time-stamped and watermarked, just like I used to do for embassy incident reports. 10 years in private security taught me that the chain of evidence wins the war, not the first punch thrown. While the videos processed, I searched the HOA member portal Marcus had set up. Buried in the event calendar was a notice for neighborhood safety enforcement, scheduled for the next evening. My jaw clenched. He wasn't backing down. He was doubling down, trying to make these fake patrols look official. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking, and felt a cold calm settle over me. Marcus had just handed me the opening I needed. Impersonation, harassment, trespassing. Every clip was ammunition for when I brought the real authorities into this. A soft knock came at the office door. Lydia stepped in, wrapped in her robe, hair messy from restless sleep. "You're still up," she said, voice low. "Yeah," I said. I found what I needed. She sat on the arm of the chair, glancing at the frozen frame on the screen. "That looks like a police badge." "It's not, but it's close enough to get him in serious trouble." I gestured to the array of screens. "We're not just fighting fines anymore. Marcus is breaking the law, and I can prove it." Lydia's hand rested on my shoulder, light but steady. "Do you think the neighbors will stand with us?" "Eventually," I said. "But I don't need them yet. All I need is this footage and the right officer to see it." Outside, a car engine hummed low, then faded. I checked the live camera feed and saw the black SUV roll past without stopping. They weren't even subtle anymore. Every loop, every slow crawl past my porch was another nail in their own coffin. I exported the video package and labeled it Marcus Impersonation 01. Watching the progress bar crawl felt like loading a magazine before a mission. I didn't need bullets for this war, just proof, patience, and the right timing. When it finished, I backed it up to 2 encrypted drives and slid one into my safe. Years of protecting high-value assets had drilled this habit into me. Evidence wasn't just for the police. It was leverage. it was insurance, and tonight, it was a promise. By the time I stepped onto the porch, the neighborhood was still. The air was heavy with that humid pre-storm feeling, and the oak swing creaked softly under my weight. I ran my hand along the armrest, tracing the grooves my father carved with his pocket knife the summer before he died. He'd told me once, a man's home isn't walls, it's the ground he's willing to defend. I whispered to the empty street, I've got you, Dad. And I've got her. Tomorrow, Marcus would think he still had control. He'd think fear was working, and he'd have no idea that every second his men played cop on my street, they were building the case that would tear his little empire apart. The knock came just after noon, sharp and insistent. I was in the kitchen slicing an apple for Lydia when the sound froze me mid-motion. A second knock, heavier this time, rattled the glass in the front door. Lydia flinched, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. "Stay back," I said, already moving toward the entryway. Through the frosted glass, I saw the silhouettes. 2 men, same black vests, same swagger. Marcus had sent his actors again. The moment I unlocked the door and opened it a crack, the taller one pushed it wide and stepped in like he owned the place. "HOA inspection," he barked, flashing that fake silver star on his chest. "We need to verify compliance." Lydia gasped behind me, stumbling back against the wall. My pulse hammered. They hadn't just crossed the line, they'd jumped it, trampling every boundary of law and decency. "You're trespassing," I said, voice low but sharp. "Step outside, now." The second man, clipboard in hand, sneered. "Sir, refusal to cooperate will escalate fines," and he never finished. In one swift movement, the first man reached for the banister, trying to move deeper into my home. His shoulder brushed Lydia's as he passed, and she cried out, gripping the wall. Her face went pale, her free hand pressing to her belly as she slid down to a crouch. Something inside me snapped. I stepped between them and my wife, my voice dropping to a growl that came from a place I hadn't visited since my deployments. "Back, outside, now." The taller man froze for half a beat, and in that moment I moved to the living room cabinet and retrieved the AR-15 from its locked case. The familiar weight settled into my hands as naturally as breathing. I didn't raise it, just racked the charging handle with a metallic snap that filled the room like a thunderclap. Both men jerked back, their bravado evaporating. The taller one muttered something about misunderstanding as they stumbled toward the door. "You think wearing a patch makes you law enforcement?" I said, following them onto the porch. My voice carried across the cul-de-sac. Curtains twitched, neighbors' faces half visible in the shadows. "You just assaulted a pregnant woman in her own home. I hope you like explaining that to the real cops." The SUV door slammed, engine roaring as they peeled away. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by Lydia's trembling sob as she sank onto the porch swing. I knelt beside her, heart still hammering. "They touched you?" I asked, voice low. She nodded, tears clinging to her lashes. He slammed my shoulder. I think the baby's okay, but..." Her voice broke. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling the slight tremor in her body, and the swing creaked beneath us. That old oak seat, carved by my father's hands, had never felt more like a fortress and a lifeline. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was assault. This was criminal. And I wasn't waiting another day to act. I helped Lydia inside and called her doctor, who insisted we come in for monitoring. While she gathered herself, I grabbed my secure drive from the safe and packed the clips from the last week. The driveway confrontation, the fake badges, and now the forced entry and contact with Lydia. When we got back from the clinic hours later, thankfully the baby was safe, I stepped out onto the porch again. The sun had dropped low, bleeding orange across the street. Every shadow felt like a hunter's perch. But I wasn't prey. Not anymore. I sent the footage to a contact at the sheriff's department and another copy to a state regulator I'd worked with in my security consulting days. The subject line was simple: impersonation and assault, Willow Bend Estates. Then I sat on the swing beside Lydia, the chains groaning as a soft breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut lawns. I could feel my father in that wood, steadying my hand, whispering the same advice he'd given me years ago. Don't bluff. When you move to finish it. Drop a like if you've ever had a moment where you knew it was time to stop tolerating abuse, I said quietly for the viewers. Subscribe to see how this ends, because after today, There's no going back. Howard Delaney showed up just after sunset, his old Ford pickup rumbling softly as it rolled to a stop in front of my house. I was on the porch swing with Lydia, the soft creak of the chain steadying my nerves, when his silhouette emerged from the truck. His hands were jammed deep in his jacket pockets, and even from the swing, I could see the tension in his shoulders. I stood as he approached. He hesitated at the bottom step, scanning the quiet street, making sure no one else was watching. "Evening, Evan," he said finally, voice low and rough. "Evening, Howard," I replied. I didn't invite him up, but he climbed the steps anyway, the boards creaking under his weight. For a long moment, he just stared at the swing, his eyes tracing the worn oak armrests. "Your dad built that, didn't he asked, almost to himself. I nodded. "He did." "Why do you ask?" Howard exhaled slowly. "Because Marcus doesn't understand things like that. To him, it's all control, fines, authority. But he's gone too far this time." Lydia shifted on the swing, her hands cradling her belly. "He slammed me into the wall, Howard," she said softly. "They came into our house." His eyes closed for a moment, and when he opened them, I saw the flicker of shame. "I know," he said. "I heard, and I saw some of it on the patrol reports. They're not supposed to be in homes. They're not supposed to touch anyone." His hands trembled as he pulled a manila folder from his jacket. "I can't keep quiet anymore." I took the folder, feeling the weight of what was inside. Pages of emails, printouts of board meeting notes, and a roster of the so-called security volunteers. My eyes caught the line that made my chest tighten. Volunteer patrols authorized to conduct compliance checks with limited entry if non-responsive. Marcus had signed it himself. "This is what I needed," I murmured, scanning the first few pages. Proof he knew, proof it wasn't a misunderstanding. Howard nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "He told us it was just about keeping the neighborhood safe, said we could avoid involving the police if we handled things ourselves. I didn't think he'd send them into your house, or hurt your wife." "You knew it was wrong," I said evenly, meeting his eyes. "And now, you're the reason this ends." The wind picked up, carrying the faint hum of a distant mower and the smell of fresh-cut grass. It was the kind of evening that should have been peaceful, the kind that reminded me of my father leaning on this very rail, telling me that real strength is quiet until it has to speak. Howard rubbed his hands together nervously. "If he finds out I gave this to you—" "He won't," I said, "because by the time he realizes it, it'll be out of his hands. The sheriff's department is already reviewing my footage. This will make sure there's no escape for him." He nodded, still jittery, then glanced at Lydia. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have spoken up sooner." She gave him a small, tired smile. Speaking up now might save someone else. Howard lingered a moment longer, like he wanted to say more, then turned to leave. His truck rumbled down the street, taillights fading into the dim orange glow of the setting sun. I carried the folder inside and spread the papers across the dining table next to my secure drive. Lydia followed, lowering herself into a chair with a soft sigh. The combination of my video evidence and Howard's documents was a hammer waiting to drop. "This is it," I said, stacking the files into a neat pile. "This is how we end this." I glanced at the porch through the window, the swing swaying gently in the evening breeze. My father's legacy, my wife's safety, our child's future, they were all wrapped up in this fight. And now, with an insider ready to expose the truth, Marcus Trent's grip on this neighborhood was starting to slip. The dining room table had become my war room. Howard's folder lay open beside my laptop, my secure drive plugged in, and every inch of wood was covered with printouts, screenshots, and clipped video stills. Lydia sat at the far end, rocking gently in a chair, her hand on her belly, watching me with quiet determination. "This is enough," I said to her, my voice low but certain. "He can't squirm out of this." The evidence was airtight. Timestamps, license plates, the fake star patches, Howard's signed roster of security volunteers, and Marcus's emails authorizing limited entry for non-compliant homeowners. Every page screamed liability, and every second of footage backed it up. I started assembling the dossier like I used to prepare reports for embassy incidents, clean, chronological, irrefutable. First, the violation notice, then the patrol intimidation, then the driveway harassment, and finally the assault and forced entry. For each event, I attached Howard's corroborating paperwork. A prosecutor wouldn't have to squint to see the pattern. Impersonation, trespass, assault, conspiracy. Lydia leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. "Do you think this will stop him before he does something worse?" I paused, looking at her, at the small life moving under her hand. It has to, and if it doesn't, the law will finish it. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from my old contact at the sheriff's department. Received footage. Reviewing. Recommend you also notify insurance carrier. I smiled grimly. Marcus had never considered the financial angle. Homeowners associations lived and died by their insurance policies. Without coverage, they were defenseless against lawsuits. I drafted a concise email to the HOA's insurer, attaching a few damning clips and a note that the board's volunteers had committed assault and impersonated law enforcement. Once the insurance company sees this, I said, they'll pull coverage. Marcus will be a king without a castle. The hours passed in a steady rhythm of typing, scanning, and labeling. My training had always been about controlling chaos, and that's exactly what this was, methodically turning Marcus's recklessness into a controlled detonation. Every time I saved a new folder or labeled another exhibit, a small weight lifted from my chest. Around 10, I took a break on the porch swing. The night was warm, cicadas singing in the trees, and the chains of the swing groaned softly as I rocked. I thought about my father again, about the afternoons we'd spent sanding the wood and arguing about which stain would last the longest. He'd been stubborn, proud, the kind of man who believed in standing his ground even if the whole world told him to move. I ran my hand along the smooth oak armrest. "We're doing it your way, Dad," I whispered. "Careful, patient. But we finish what we start." Back inside, I printed the cover sheet for the sheriff's case file, labeling it Willow Bend HOA, impersonation and assault. I added a second packet for the state regulator and a third for the insurance carrier. 3 fronts, 3 pressure points. Marcus wouldn't see it coming until all of them hit at once. Lydia watched me slip the files into separate envelopes. "What happens after you send them?" "Then we wait," I said, "and we watch him burn his own bridge." I set a camera feed on my monitor, looping live footage of the street. The black SUV crawled by once more, slower than before, the driver glancing nervously toward my porch. I almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea that every loop was being logged, every frame stored in a folder that could put him in cuffs. The swing creaked behind me as I settled back down, a calm settling over the storm inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt control, tipping back in my favor. By the next evening, the trap was ready. Every camera was armed, every file was copied to 3 drives, and my phone was synced to the live feeds. I'd sent the full dossier to the sheriff's department, the state regulator, and the HOA's insurer. All that was left was to let Marcus walk straight into his own disaster. I sat on the porch swing, rocking slowly, as the sun slipped behind the rooftops. The air smelled of warm asphalt and cut grass. Lydia watched from the screen door, her eyes following the motion of the swing chains like a metronome for her nerves. "They'll come tonight," I said quietly. "He won't be able to resist showing the neighborhood he still runs it." She nodded, her hand on her belly. "And the police? They're ready," I said. "They'll wait until he crosses the line on camera. Then it's over." The first sign came just after 9, a faint glow down the street, the black SUV creeping into the cul-de-sac like a predator sniffing its territory. My cameras picked it up instantly, and the feed popped onto my phone. 2 men inside, both in black vests, same fake silver star patch gleaming under the streetlight. I didn't move. I wanted them to feel like they had the upper hand, that I was just another homeowner stuck on his porch swing. Inside, my secure drive hummed as it uploaded the live feed to a cloud backup. I'd learned long ago that a copy in your hand wasn't enough. You needed proof that couldn't burn or disappear. The SUV idled in front of my house for a full minute. One man leaned out the window, scanning the porch like he was daring me to speak. I didn't. Instead, I let the subtle blink of the camera LED do the talking. Then the headlights cut across my driveway, and the SUV rolled forward, stopping just short of the porch. The driver climbed out first, heavy boots hitting the asphalt, and the passenger followed with his clipboard. They weren't here to talk. They were here to show force. That's when the second vehicle appeared at the end of the street. A county cruiser, lights off, rolling silent. My chest tightened. The real law had arrived. I kept my voice calm, projecting just enough to carry in the night air. "Evening, gentlemen. Back for another unlawful inspection." Clipboard guy stiffened. "Sir, HOA security is authorized to—" I raised a hand. "Stop right there. One more step onto this porch and you're committing trespass. And every second you keep wearing that fake badge, that's impersonation. You sure you want to keep going?" They hesitated. Then the passenger muttered, "We're just doing our job." "Your job," I said, letting the steel into my voice, "is about to get you arrested." Right on cue, the cruiser's lights flared red and blue. The SUV driver spun, eyes wide, as the real deputy stepped out, hand resting on his holster. "Evening, folks," he called. "We've had some reports about illegal security activity in this neighborhood." The two men froze. Marcus wasn't here tonight, but his pawns were standing in the trap I'd built. Inside, Lydia whispered through the screen door, "They're caught." I nodded, still keeping my hands visible, calm, steady. This wasn't the moment for bravado. It was the moment for proof. I gestured toward my camera above the porch. "Everything they've done this week is on video. You'll find it in your email." The deputy glanced at the SUV, then at the fake badges. "Gentlemen, step over here. We need to have a conversation about impersonation of law enforcement." The clipboard slipped from the passenger's hand and hit the pavement. The swing creaked as I leaned back, the chains groaning in rhythm with my heartbeat. I didn't smile, but I felt the weight of weeks of tension start to shift. The board's grip on this neighborhood had just cracked in real time. Drop a like if you've ever wanted to see justice roll up with its lights flashing, and subscribe to watch the moment this HOA's power collapses. The showdown is finally here. The night air buzzed with red and blue light as the cruiser's siren gave a short, sharp chirp. It wasn't loud, but it carried through Willow Bend Estates like a thunderclap. Windows slid open, blinds shifted. Neighbors who had been hiding behind their curtains for weeks were finally peeking out. Fear had kept them silent, but curiosity and justice had a way of drawing people to the light. The deputy's voice cut through the quiet. "Gentlemen, step to the front of the vehicle, hands where I can see them." The two security volunteers moved slowly, their shoulders tight, the bravado gone. The taller one, the same man who'd shoved Lydia days ago, glanced at me for the briefest moment. He knew. He knew this wasn't just a warning anymore. This was the beginning of the end. I stayed on the porch swing, rocking gently, my phone streaming live to the cloud. The chains creaked as I let the deputy handle the scene. My voice stayed calm. "Deputy, I've sent the full video package to your department and the state regulator. It includes the assault, the trespassing, and the impersonation. Tonight makes 3 separate incidents." He gave a short nod, keeping his eyes on the men. "Yeah, I saw your clips. That's why I'm here." He turned back to the volunteers. "You boys know impersonating an officer is a felony in this state?" Neither spoke. The clipboard guy's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Behind me, the screen door creaked. Lydia stepped out slowly, one hand braced on the frame, the other cradling her belly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was a living accusation. The deputy noticed her and frowned. "Ma'am, are you the one who was assaulted?" Lydia nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." He pushed me against the wall. I thought I was going to fall. The deputy's jaw tightened. "Understood." He spoke into his radio, requesting another unit. Then he gestured toward the SUV. "Keys on the hood. Step back." The taller man complied, his hands trembling now. Every second of it was caught on my cameras from multiple angles, and every second of it was one step closer to tearing Marcus's little empire apart. I rose from the swing and walked down the steps, careful and deliberate. "Deputy, just so you know, I've also contacted their insurance carrier. Once they see this, the HOA will lose its liability coverage. If these guys thought they were doing Marcus a favor, they're about to find out he can't protect them." The deputy gave me a sidelong glance that carried quiet approval. Smart move. A second cruiser arrived, headlights sweeping the cul-de-sac. More neighbors emerged now, emboldened by the lights and the presence of real authority. Whispers carried in the night. Snippets like, "Finally," and "I knew it would happen," floated through the air. Marcus's spell of fear was breaking right in front of my house. One neighbor, an older man from 2 doors down, muttered to another, "Told you the board was out of control." His voice wasn't quiet enough to miss. I caught the words and filed them away. Community sentiment was shifting, and I'd need that momentum for the public reckoning to come. The deputy had the volunteers seated on the curb now, hands on their knees, while he photographed their vests and the silver star patches. He held one up for the camera on his body armor. "This will go straight to the DA," he said. Inside my chest, tension unwound in slow coils. Weeks of waiting, documenting, holding my ground. It was finally paying off. Marcus had built his kingdom on intimidation and fake authority, and tonight it was collapsing under real law and cold evidence. I stepped back onto the porch, standing next to Lydia as the swing swayed behind us in the warm night breeze. "This is the beginning," I said quietly for the viewers. "Marcus Trent thinks he's untouchable, but the law doesn't care about clipboards or empty threats. This neighborhood's about to see what happens when you push the wrong man too far." The emergency community meeting felt like a courtroom before the gavel dropped. The HOA clubhouse, usually a hollow echo of potlucks and holiday decor, was packed with neighbors who hadn't dared to speak for weeks. Tonight, their whispers were sharp with curiosity and long-buried resentment. Folding chairs scraped the tile floor, and the air smelled faintly of dust and tension. Lydia and I arrived early, but the room was already alive with murmurs. Howard Delaney stood near the back, shifting from foot to foot, his eyes flicking between me and the table where Marcus Trent sat, flanked by 2 board members. Marcus's smile was tight, his face shiny with sweat despite the humming AC. He tapped a pen against a folder, a rhythm of nerves he probably thought sounded confident. The deputy from that night was here too, uniform crisp, standing near the entrance like a silent guardian. His presence alone sent a ripple through the room. I walked to the front, set a laptop on the folding table, and connected it to the small projector the HOA usually used for budget slides. The image of my driveway appeared on the wall, the black SUV, the fake vests, the silver star patch catching the sun. A collective gasp broke the murmuring. Marcus's pen stopped tapping. "Neighbors," I said, my voice steady but carrying. "This is what's been happening on our streets. This is what your HOA dues have been funding: intimidation, trespass, and impersonation of law enforcement." I clicked to the next clip, Lydia's voice on the phone, trembling as she told me they were at the door. Then the footage of the men stepping into our home. The moment they brushed past her shoulder played in slow motion, and the room went dead silent. Lydia's hand found mine, her grip firm but trembling. "This isn't just against the bylaws," I continued. "It's a crime. And as of last night, the sheriff's department has everything they need to move forward." A hand went up in the back. Mrs. Paxton, the retired teacher from 3 houses down, spoke first. We didn't know it went this far," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of guilt and outrage. "We were scared to speak up." Howard cleared his throat. Every head turned as he stepped forward, the manila folder I'd returned to him tucked under his arm. "I served as treasurer on this board for 8 years, he said, voice uneven. "And I can tell you, Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. He pressured us to approve these patrols and told us it was safer to keep the police out of neighborhood matters." Gasps and mutters filled the room. Marcus shot to his feet. "Howard, that's a lie. You signed those authorizations." Howard flinched but didn't back down. "I signed because I was scared of you, like everyone else here. But I can't stay quiet after what you did to Lydia." The deputy stepped forward. "Mr. Trent," he said calmly, "we have your emails, your patrol rosters, and witness statements. I suggest you sit down before you add obstruction to your list of charges." Marcus froze. His face flushed red as the weight of the room turned against him. He sank back into his chair, jaw tight, eyes darting to the exits like a trapped animal. I faced the neighbors. "We have a choice tonight. This board has violated your trust, endangered families, and exposed this community to lawsuits and state investigations. We can either stay silent, or we can vote them out and start over." Hands shot up around the room. A murmur of agreement swelled into a chorus. Someone shouted, "Vote them out!" and the energy shifted like a storm breaking. People who had been silent for months were suddenly leaning forward, talking to each other, nodding toward me and Howard. The deputy looked around and gave a subtle nod, as if to say the community had taken the first step toward its own justice. Marcus's empire was crumbling not just under law, but under the weight of his neighbors' collective disgust. I glanced at Lydia, who met my eyes with a small, fierce smile. The porch swing, the legacy of my father, the home we were building, it all felt one step safer tonight. The vote was unanimous, and it felt like a collective exhale after months of suffocating tension. Neighbors who had once peeked from behind curtains were now standing in small clusters, talking freely, their voices full of relief. Marcus Trent didn't stay to hear the final count. He stormed out of the clubhouse, face flushed, muttering something about lawyers that nobody took seriously anymore. The deputy watched him leave, shaking his head. "He's already facing charges," he said to me quietly. "Assault, trespass, impersonation, and with your documentation, it's airtight." Howard Delaney exhaled beside me, shoulders sagging as if he'd been holding his breath for months. "I didn't think anyone could beat him," he admitted. "I thought he'd keep getting away with it forever." I looked around at the neighbors, some smiling, some still processing the fallout. "Bullies count on silence," I said. "All it takes is one person to start pushing back, and the rest follows." The board was dissolved on the spot. A temporary committee of volunteers formed, led by Howard, with the deputy present to witness the transfer of files and the surrender of the HOA keys. For the first time in a long time, I saw pride flicker in Howard's eyes. By the time Lydia and I drove home, the street felt different. Porch lights were on, kids' bikes leaned against fences, and neighbors waved as we passed. It wasn't just my victory, it was the neighborhood reclaiming itself. Back at the house, I helped Lydia to the porch swing. She lowered herself slowly, smiling as the chains creaked and the oak seat swayed under her weight. The soft breeze carried the smell of jasmine from a nearby yard. I sat beside her, the night air warm against my skin, and for the first time in weeks, the porch felt like a sanctuary again. "You did it," she said, voice soft but steady. "We did it," I corrected, glancing at her belly. "And he's never setting foot on this property again." We rocked in silence for a while, letting the sound of the chains mark the rhythm of our calm. My father's memory was in every grain of this wood, in every gentle sway. I imagined him leaning on the porch rail, nodding in quiet approval. My phone buzzed with a new notification, an email from the HOA's insurance carrier confirming that coverage was suspended pending investigation. Marcus's empire wasn't just over, it was financially shattered. If he wanted to rebuild, he'd do it without the neighborhoods, money, or trust. The next morning, I watched from the porch as the sheriff's cruiser idled in front of Marcus's house. 2 deputies escorted him to the car, his face blank with disbelief. No neighbors turned away this time. A few even recorded from their driveways, finally unafraid. I didn't cheer. I didn't need to. Justice didn't always need noise. It just needed to be seen. Later that afternoon, Howard stopped by with a paper in his hand. "Interim bylaws," he said with a small smile. "No more patrols, no more intimidation. First order of business, protecting residents, not harassing them." I signed as a witness, the pen moving smoothly across the page. When he left, I sat back on the swing with Lydia. The street was quiet, but it was the right kind of quiet this time, the sound of safety returning. I glanced at the porch rail, ran my hand along the familiar grooves. "Dad was right," I said quietly. "A man's home isn't walls. It's the ground he's willing to defend. And the people he defends it for." Lydia leaned her head against my shoulder, and the chains groaned gently as the swing rocked. In the distance, kids laughed, and a lawnmower hummed like life was finally moving forward. If you've ever had to fight for your home, your family, or your peace, you know how good this moment feels. Comment below with your own HOA stories, or tell me where you're watching from. Because your voice matters, and standing up always starts with one person.